Just Leadership USA is a not-for-profit agency dedicated to cutting the U.S. correctional population in half by 2030 while reducing crime. The agency strives to empower people most affected by incarceration to drive policy reform. Glenn Martin is the founder and president of the agency and spoke with us recently about the unique perspective he brings to the work and the challenges of building an advocacy movement.
My name is Glenn Martin. I'm the founder and president of Just Leadership USA, an organization with the goal of cutting the number of people under correctional supervision in half by 2030. Some of the challenges facing Just Leadership USA include the fact that the theory of change puts us a bit ahead of people who are in the field that we're working within. So in some ways, we're trying to help our colleagues use their imagination to understand the value that our leaders bring to the table in the movement to reform our criminal justice system and end mass incarceration. And then on a very practical level, I mean, if you're ahead of the curve on the idea, then by definition, you're ahead of the curve on the funding. And so in some ways, we're sort of hoping our philanthropic partners catch up to the vision that we have for investing in these leaders. So to address the challenges that I've come across in philanthropy and in the field around people having a hard time envisioning the value of investing in formerly incarcerated people, I've done two things. One is to use my own personal story and testimony a lot more often to help people wrap their heads around this vision I have for investing in other people like me. And two is to help people look historically. You know, if you look forward, it might seem daunting, and the idea of including people who have served time in prison as part of the solution may be something that people have a hard time wrapping their heads around. However, if you look historically in this country, any meaningful movement has included the voices and leadership of the people who are most oppressed by the system that you're trying to reform. Our particularly bold and ambitious goal of cutting the number of people under correctional supervision in half by 2030 sets us apart from most people in the field, definitely when we launched. And what it means is that we have to find unique ways to fund our organization because we don't believe that once we get beyond the whole shiny new thing, right, when organizations fund you for the first couple of years, that we'll be able to sustain that sort of support without thinking about ways of being creative. And so one way is that we're a membership organization. And so we currently, in less than a year, have a few thousand members from around the country who each pay just $1 per month to be members of our organization. And what that creates for us is a pool of hopefully unrestricted funding to help fund our program to do the work the way we think it needs to be done. And it diversifies our funding, and simultaneously it builds a base of support for reform, not much unlike other membership organizations, whether it's ACLU or NAACP, or even one of the largest, which is AARP.
So you're kind of
gotten through year one successfully. We've trained over 100 formerly incarcerated people representing over 16 states around the country. And so as we go into year two, I think we go from helping the world understand what the leadership training has done for these leaders to what these leaders can do for the movement. And so in year two, we move into the advocacy space. We inject our leaders into the existing conversations. We don't necessarily line them up with the policies that are being proposed currently, because the truth is we believe that many of those policies actually fall far short of the vision we have as an organization. But we position our leaders, we strengthen our leaders, we support our leaders in being out there and holding the field accountable to responding to the voices and the vision as defined by people who are most impacted by these issues. Nonprofit industry, if you will, is becoming increasingly professionalized, increasingly sophisticated. And I was lucky enough to have 13 years of nonprofit experience that helped for me to demystify what it takes to build a business and to fund a nonprofit. And sometimes those two things don't line up with each other. But what works for me is when I ask myself the question of whether the pursuit of the business end of the work aligns itself with the mission as opposed to the other way around. Because you can find yourself chasing dollars relatively quickly. I had a funder on the phone just yesterday who kept asking me to show evidence that our leaders were going to be tied to very specific pieces of legislation that are currently being moved forward. And I said to her, well, that's sort of the antithesis of what it is we're doing here, because our leaders are the first ones to say that the proposals that are currently out there fall far short of what their vision is for reform in this country. And so that meant potentially letting go of those potential resources. And in that particular case, we were talking about $100,000 per year for 3 years. A pretty considerable investment, yet an investment that I would argue might take us in the wrong direction if we chase those dollars. I think that other agencies can learn from Just Leadership USA. A very young organization, a very new organization, is actually humility. You know, we spend a lot of time asking questions about what we're doing well and what we're doing poorly, and soliciting feedback from our constituents, from our clients, making sure we're listening to their voices, allowing them to challenge us, allowing them to help us further shape the program, shape the vision, shape the mission, and essentially sharing power. Even as I launched Just Leadership USA just a short year ago, I did come into this trying my damnness to really focus on not building a business and instead building a movement. And I find that, yes, I'm building the business around that movement, but the more I think of movement building versus building a business, and having the building of the business be the sort of frame around what it is I'm actually trying to do, the more successful we are as an organization. So for instance, we've gotten through our entire first year without a physical brick and mortar location. And most people go the other way around. They want to have a place, they want to show people they're in business. I find that showing people in business means investing in the very people we say we care about, and they've become the ambassadors for us. And now as we go into year 2, we're thinking, oh, we need a physical space. But that is not the traditional approach to building an organization. People tend to look at the sort of nuts and bolts and say, that's where I start. I actually think that that's not the right way to go. The right way to go is to follow your heart, follow your mission, stay on focus, and then build the sort of bricks and mortar stuff around you as you need it to be more successful. But if I were advising a person who's building an organization, I would say, you know, you can't divorce yourself from the fact that you, as the visionary leader, is the initial investment people make. People invest in people. You know, people follow ideas and people. They don't, I mean, half my funders probably don't understand our leadership program in detail, but what they understand is that there's this charismatic, passionate leader who's interested in either leading from the front of the room or leading from behind, but leading. And so I do think it's the responsibility of the person who has the vision, the person who launches the organization, to make that commitment to the work, because good work alone doesn't get funded. Personalities, visions, big ideas get funded. And so that's part of my job, to be quite honest. And you're talking to a person who grew up in a household, a Caribbean family here, new to the United States, where everything my mother taught me was to avoid the limelight and avoid authority and stay below the radar. And everything I do now is actually quite the opposite of that. That when you go this far down the road with policies that have hurt such a large group of Americans, over 100 million with an arrest or criminal record on file, that the way to hit a tipping point, the way to undo that, is changing the consciousness of this country, of getting to a point where enough Americans say, enough is enough, this is wrong, not in my name.